So the other day at the Chowan River here for our BPT event, I put out a video on how my day one practice went and how it didn't really go as planned. But this video I'm going to share with you of how day 2 and day 3 went. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with what I figured out. And really looking forward to how this translates into my competition days. And I can do this now because it's black and white. There is a rule in our rules that says my competition can't go on social media and watch these videos that I put out. If it pertains to the Chowan River BPT event, my competition can't watch it. We were always worried about that in the past, and I'm guessing possibly some guys were doing that in the past, but now it's black and white, it's in the rules. So if you're watching this, you're not one of my competitors in the event. Well, here we are. We're at the Chowan River, and we've had 3 days of practice. I'm in Group B, so I have the day off. So it's really a great time for me to get dialed in for tackle. I actually worked on some of my tackle last night, and going to finish it up here today. And you know, you hope going into a tournament that you have 4 or 5 rods done up, and that's the most. And as you can see, that's not quite the case here. And I had a decent practice, especially after seeing what the weights are. It's kind of similar to what I thought. And from what I can tell, if I can catch 3 to 4 pounds a period, you know, 2 or 3 scorables a period, that'll be enough to be in the money. If I can catch, you know, 3 to 5 scorables a period, that'll be enough to make the knockout round. It's looking like it's going to take 20 to 25 to make a check and low 30s to make it to the knockout round. So with that being said, 3 days of practice, this is what I've compiled here. And five, 7. Wow, beautiful fish. You know, it's just that time of year where I think the fish feed real early, you know, just first thing, pretty good, and then they just get tucked up under these pads, and you've got to get something that kind of gets their attention. And, you know, frog's such a great way of doing that, and just being able to cover water. And, you know, you can see there's just miles of this with isolated patches of pads, so that's pretty cool. You know, when you go into a tournament like this, it's 2 days of competition, and you want to do what I did in practice, and I'm hoping that's the case. Primarily, most of my bites came on a frog, a buzzbait, a bladed jig, and a spinnerbait, all moving baits. But as you can see, I've got a variety up here. You know, I've got a spinning rod with the usual wacky worm on it, just because I think tournament time, you got to always have a wacky worm on, just because if one comes up and misses my frog or my buzzbait, it's probably the best bait to follow up with on. Or if I need to skip way up somewhere where fish are feeling finicky, that's a good way to get a bite. So you kind of always got to have a wacky rig on. I've got a drop shot rig tied on. You know, these are all just the what ifs. I've got a pop-R type popper bait on. Haven't even thrown one in practice because, one, I don't feel like it's necessarily a good search bait, but I'm thinking too that if I'm getting bit on a frog in certain places where it's a little more open around cypress trees, a popping bait might be something that I might mix it up with. And what I mean by that is, in practice, I tried to cover as much water as possible, but after now doing my 3 days of practice and talking to Wesley, to Alton, and just talking to other guys, it seems like there's key areas on this body of water where you get bit, but then you go for a mile without getting a bite. So my goal tomorrow is to stay around my waypoints where I had bites. So what I'm thinking is, if I can go through an area, you know, primarily one of my baits is a buzz bait, and catch them on a buzzbait, that's great. I'll just keep doing that. But, you know, if the buzzbait dies, I've got some shallow crankbaits tied on. I've got a bladed jig, a spinnerbait. You know, I'm going to mix it up with some other things. But, you know, I've got 3 flipping rods done up here too. Why? Because you always got to have a flipping rod done up for just in case. But also, I'm going to have a little creature bait tied on for another follow-up bait to flip. You know, if something you know, if a fish blows up on my frog in the pads, I can just pitch that bait in there and catch them that way. Because I actually did catch a couple non-scorables that way in practice, was just a follow-up bait, just a good little creature bait, you know, when those fish miss your topwater. Obviously for me, don't care what time of year it is, what type of water we're at or whatever, but if you know me now, by now, you're gonna know I'm gonna have a bladed jig tied on. No different here. I didn't wear them out on it, but I did have a couple bites on a bladed jig. So tomorrow when I get to those key areas, you better bet that I'm gonna pick them apart pretty good with the bladed jig some. And then a spinnerbait. You know, a spinnerbait, there's a lot of areas here where you just can't fish a bladed jig. There's too much brush in the water, laydowns, that kind of stuff, and a bladed jig just doesn't do well there. So I'm gonna mix it up with the spinnerbait. And the good reason is because I caught a 6.5 pounder doing it in practice. So, you know, while a spinnerbait seems old school, a spinnerbait still works. So I'm gonna have that on as well. And I think that's about it. So, you know, I'm just in the process here of, you know, I've got 3 frog rods done up. One because I'm gonna have a regular walking frog, I'm gonna have a popping frog. And being that it's gonna be such a primary part of my arsenal, I'm gonna have 3 of them done up. I forgot to mention, I did catch a 5.5 pounder on a frog too. So, you know, buzzbait was a primary deal for me. The frog was a primary deal for me, and not that it's a big secret here anyway. And then spinnerbait's probably going to be my 3 main deals. But, you know, like I said, I'm going to mix it up. I've got an old school balsa square bill on just because kind of what you threw back in the day when it was hot and, you know, stained water, a lot of laydowns and all that. So the square bill is going to be a good option. So while I've got 3 techniques that I primarily plan on doing, I've still got 17 rods here to do up just to cover the gamut there. So that's what we got at this point. So now we just got to finish up and get them all put away in the rod box. If you've ever been here, I got to say it's one of the most bassiest looking places I've ever fished in my life, next to probably Lake Okeechobee, because everywhere you're fishing, every single cast looks like you're going to catch a giant bass. And while that is appealing, it's very overwhelming at times, because when you get out there and you realize there's not a bass under every lily pad next to every cypress tree, it begins to wear on you, and find out that it's a grind, and you really have to cover a lot of miles and really put your time into finding the areas that hold fish. So then that's what I was able to do. I was covered a lot of water, and what's crazy is you'll go a long ways and then you'll hit a stretch and catch 2 or 3 and then go a long ways as well. So come competition, I'm hopefully going to have enough of those waypoints where I've caught fish to be able to go to back to those key stretches, capitalize on those. If I can catch 1 or 2 or 5 fish from an area, I'm going to do pretty well. So obviously day 1 of practice did not go as planned. I had, I think, 27 rods done up with all these expectations. And then you get out there and you find out that, you know, this, and this are not going to work. They're not going to be into play because of these conditions. So you narrow it down. Luckily, I narrowed it down. Day 2 got better. Day 3 was decent, but come tournament time, I think I've got about 3 or 4 primary baits that I plan to focus on, and hopefully it's going to be the right choice. So be sure to check back here at my site because we're here at the Chowan River. I'm going to do a video after day 1 here at the Chowan River, day 2 of competition, hopefully the knockout round, and hopefully on day 4, you're going to see me holding up that big trophy. And be sure to check out my pregame and postgame with Wesley as well. See our predictions, what we think is going to happen, and what actually ends up happening.